The province's police watchdog is investigating after a woman fell to her death from a high-rise building shortly after an interaction with Toronto police this morning. It is the same Toronto community housing building where another woman fell to her death while interacting with police back in 2020. Our Greg Ross is on scene at 100 High Park Avenue. And Greg, what do we know about what happened there this morning?
Well, Calda, the SIU tells us that the police officers were called here just before 2 o'clock this morning as part of an investigation into a wanted person. Officers spoke with a 44-year-old woman who was in one of the units here but did not live there. And police tell us that this is the woman that police were here for. Now, according to the SIU, after talking to police, the woman attempted to scale down the balcony of the apartment and she ended up falling to the ground. Now, the woman was rushed to hospital where she later died. Earlier today, I spoke with a man who lives on the 9th floor of this building, and he told us that it all happened inside his apartment. He says the woman was there visiting him. He says it was a friend of his, and while she was there, police came to the door. He says the woman went out onto his balcony, which is connected to his neighbor's balcony. He claims the woman climbed over a dividing wall and attempted to hide from police.
I guess she was hiding down, whatever. So the first cop went over the to the end of the balcony, and then he saw her. So she's saying, "Oh, I just want to see my grandkids. I want to see my grandkids. I don't want to go right now." And the other cop went there, and they kept saying, "Come on over. Just come on over. We're like, you can't do anything. We got to arrest you." All I know is I saw her hand, and then they said, "Don't jump, 7 times," and then she was gone. I'm traumatized.
Now, we also spoke with a representative from the SIU. Here's what they had to say about this investigation.
SIU is in the process of talking with civilian witnesses and arranging interviews with the officers that were present. The SIU has cleared that scene for now, but the work is still very much ongoing. There's a postmortem exam of the woman on Wednesday. And there have also been conversations with the woman's family to notify them of the death. The information that I have, it's quite preliminary because there are a lot of steps that need to be taken to figure out what happened. So the investigators are looking to see if there's CCTV. I think there was some from the hallway. So they're kind of piecing that together.
Now, Calda, as you mentioned off the top, there was a very similar investigation at this very same building back in 2020, and that's when 29-year-old Regis Korshinsky-Paquette fell from a balcony here. Police were called to this building by her family, and according to the SIU report, in that case, Korshinsky-Paquette was also trying to scale an adjoining balcony when she fell. Her family sued the city as well as 5 Toronto police officers, claiming that she had been pushed by the officers. The SIU, though, cleared the officers in that case. Kelda?
Thanks so much, Greg. Our Greg Ross reporting. Toronto police are launching a new initiative aimed at addressing the ongoing turf war in the towing industry. It comes after several shootings last week, picking up on a violent 2024. Dale Manukduk has this story.
Clearly, there's a turf war going on here.
Just 2 weeks into the year, and Toronto police say the city's tow truck industry is seeing a massive spike in violence.
7 out of the 10 shootings so far this year in firearm discharges have been related to the tow truck industry, according to our investigations, and that's clearly not acceptable. It's a lot of public fear out there.
Just last week, 3 Scarborough shootings are all believed to be connected to the towing industry, and albeit a small sample, 2025 picks up where last year left off, when nearly 1 in every 8 shootings in Toronto are linked to the turf war.
It's earlier in the year, and hopefully that we can the police departments and the authorities can combat that and get those stats down.
Toronto police announcing the launch of Project Dodger. Plainclothes, uniformed officers and investigators will be dedicated to working the towing beat. Last year, TPS saw some success with Project Beacon. That led to the arrest of 6 individuals and 184 charges laid related to a homicide and 13 tow truck-related shootings.
We had some success there. We made some arrests, but we can't stop and we can't look back and go, wow, what a great job we did. The reality is, obviously, there's still violence out there, so we've got to tackle this.
The towing industry turf wars are having an impact regardless if someone was victim to a shooting or involved in an act of violence. CBC Toronto spoke to several towing operators who refuse to speak out because they're afraid of being targeted. We also spoke to several auto body shops who had a towing element to their business but ceased operations due to the violence.
It's unfortunate that those that make a living doing tow truck driving or related activities would have to change their business model solely because of the action of a small group.
Obviously, they have to look at their health and safety of themselves and their employees first and foremost, but it shouldn't be this way. Unfortunately, it is right now.
Police aren't the only ones addressing the issue. The government has also stepped in with criminal record checks and certification through the Ministry of Transportation.
They pull criminal background checks on drivers and companies. If charges aren't laid and convictions aren't happening, it's hard for the regulatory system that's been put in place to do its job to weed out those that all industry operators don't want to see in their industry.
Police are asking that anyone with information on the recent shootings come forward. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Ontario's top cop says a surge in border security outside of the province's 14 ports of entry is needed. This comes as political rhetoric about the issue swirls with just 1 week to go until U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration. Sean Jeffords has more.
The Ontario Provincial Police is bolstering its presence in border communities across the province. It's part of Operation Deterrence, announced by Premier Doug Ford in response to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's tariff threats. OPP Commissioner Thomas Carrique says there are legitimate reasons to beef up border enforcement outside of the politics swirling around the issue right now.
It is our responsibility to ensure that we are putting our best effort towards keeping Ontarians, Canadians, and people on the U.S. side of the border as safe as we can.
200 emergency response team officers will work to stem the flow of illegal guns, drugs, and human trafficking. Carrique says the OPP's work has been underway since December and is already producing results. He points to the arrest of 4 people on human trafficking charges last week near Cornwall.
We have had an immediate plan to respond to concerns over border safety and security, which has allowed us to enhance our presence. But we need to ensure that that presence is scalable, it's sustainable, it's intelligence-led.
Liberal MPP John Fraser says he supports the increase in security, but it will require more resources.
The concern would be that if you started to lose some community policing in communities across Ontario where the OPP are serving, that would be of great concern to those communities.
This expert who studies the border worries the new policy could create obstacles to trade and travel.
We always run the risk of thickening the border, which means we are putting up more barriers to getting the good actors, the legitimate trade and legitimate movement of people efficiently through the Canada-U.S. border.
This expert who studies migrants and the border says asylum seekers are exercising their legal rights, and this new enforcement could mean they take greater risks.
It seems that the conversation has really become so turned towards the kind of framings that the United States has been using around migration, particularly the incoming President Trump. And Canada seems to be kind of falling in line with these particular framings.
Carrique says the operation isn't a short-term project.
So what we have seen over the last 6 weeks is not necessarily going to be the same presence that we'll see for the next 6 months or next 6 years. But this is something that requires long-term solutions, a long-term commitment.
Carrique couldn't say what the program will cost, but says he is working with the government to determine the expense for a long-term plan. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
CBC News has learned former Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland is set to announce within the week that she will run for leader of the Liberal Party. Chrystia Freeland prominently resigned from Justin Trudeau's cabinet last month. On the same day, she was supposed to deliver the federal government's fall economic statement. Her resignation sparked fresh calls for the Prime Minister to step down and end his 9-year stretch as leader. 3 weeks later, Justin Trudeau announced that he would resign once the Liberal Party picks a new leader. That is set to happen on March 9th. Well, Doug Ford giving the clearest indication yet today that a snap provincial election call is likely on the way in the face of Trump's tariff threat. The Premier's comments coming after two opposition leaders said there's no need to go to the polls early. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop has that story.
Premier Doug Ford talked up Ontario's mining potential, part of a plan to win over Americans, especially incoming President Donald Trump.
Who has more critical minerals than anyone right now in North America? It's Ontario, and we're willing to share that with our friends and allies. I've lived 20 years in the U.S.
It's the latest in what Ford calls Fortress AmCan, an attempt to avoid Trump's threat of adding 25% tariffs to Canadian goods. But if they do happen,
if it comes to it, and we have to spend tens of billions of dollars, we go to the people. Let the people decide. It's their money. It's not the government's.
Asked if that means Ontarians will head to the polls early if tariffs are added.
Well, let's take a look at what happens on January 20th or 21st. And all depends on what sort of tariffs he's putting in there.
But earlier in the day, opposition leaders had already said an early election isn't needed, and they might support extra spending given potential tariffs.
I absolutely am willing to look at those things. And so to pretend that we wouldn't is just another example of Doug Ford looking for an excuse to go to the polls.
The reckless, self-interested actions of Doug Ford.
Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie says Ford never went to the people on other spending.
These are tax dollars going back to taxpayers.
Such as sending out $200 checks to all Ontarians or bringing booze to corner stores a year early.
He doesn't need a new mandate now. He has a majority government. He can do whatever he needs to do in the next year and a half. Right now, people need stability.
But the opposition leaders are speaking out at a time when polls put Ford well ahead of them. They believe that's the main reason he wants to go to the polls early. That and the ongoing RCMP investigation into his government. This is all happening as Donald Trump is 1 week away from officially taking over as president. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow releasing a proposed 2025 city budget today. The draft document includes an almost 7% tax increase, which the mayor says is needed to help fill a more than $1 billion budget hole. Sarah McMillan reports.
Increased funding for TTC and police, investments in housing initiatives, expanding a school food program, and having more libraries open 7 days a week. Those are some of the priority areas Mayor Olivia Chow is highlighting in Toronto's 2025 budget.
Whether you are taking TTC at night, a senior who needs to take an ambulance, or relying on sidewalks and road clear of snow and ice, or in need of crisis intervention, the city has to work for you.
To pay for it and maintain city services, she's proposing a 6.9% property tax increase. That's composed of two parts, a 5.4% increase that will go to the city's operating budget and 1.5% for capital projects. For an average homeowner, it means paying about $268 more this year.
The mayor identified that budgets are about priorities, and I would suggest triple the rate of inflation for a tax increase does not prioritize affordability.
City staff say keeping property tax rates at the level of inflation would mean the city would need to cut services.
We have no choice but to balance. So for every percentage drop, it's $46 million. It needs to be found somewhere else within the budget.
This year's proposed property tax increase comes after last year's 9.5% hike. City staff say the increases have been needed to deal with structural financial issues, and it will take several years for the city to achieve financial sustainability.
13 straight years of austerity put us in a completely unviable budget situation. This is the second budget in a row that starts to dig us out of that hole.
Budget Committee Vice Chair Gord Perks says this budget is what the city needs and defends the proposed tax hike.
Public services save people money. If the transit system can't get you to work on time, you're paying downtown parking rates. If our water services aren't good enough, you're paying extra costs. If the firefighters don't show up on time, you're paying a higher insurance premium.
The draft budget will be reviewed over the next 2 weeks, with the mayor's final budget going to City Council next month. Sarah McMillan, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. A high-ranking Toronto police officer will be temporarily demoted for interfering with the investigation into a crash involving her nephew. Inspector Joyce Schertzer was found guilty of 2 Police Act misconduct charges. Clara Pasica has more on the penalty.
A disciplinary hearing held inside Toronto Police headquarters behind me has now concluded. In it, a senior officer, Joyce Schertzer, learned that she would be demoted from inspector to staff sergeant for a period of 9 months before being reinstated to her rank of inspector. Now, this all stems from a 2022 incident in May involving her nephew and a collision. In that incident, Schertzer, who's in 11 Division, learned of this collision involving her nephew from a family member, and she arranged for an officer from her division to attend the scene and made an appearance there herself. The tribunal heard her nephew was cleared to leave the area just 10 minutes after talking to an officer, and that the officer's body camera was turned off at one point. The prosecution side had argued that this officer should be demoted for 1 year, while the defense side had said that they should face 5 days without pay. In the end, the hearing officer said a 9-month demotion was the most appropriate, weighing the different factors in this case, looking at a number of other cases, including in other jurisdictions. The officer saying that weighing factors like that this person had had an exemplary career, many letters of support were written about this person, but there are also other factors to consider, such as the fact this person was quite of a senior rank, and the example that it sets for others is particularly important. Clara Pasica, CBC News, Toronto.
Legal arguments began today for 4 teenage girls accused in the deadly swarming attack of a 59-year-old Toronto man. Police say Kenneth Lee, who was living in the city's shelter system, was attacked and stabbed to death in December 2022. 8 girls between the ages of 13 and 16 were arrested for that attack. Each of them was initially charged with second-degree murder, but 4 have since pleaded guilty to lesser charges, including manslaughter and assault. A judge-only trial is scheduled for 2 of the remaining girls this month. They both face second-degree murder charges. The other 2 will stand trial in May, one for second-degree murder, the other for manslaughter. A 9-year-old boy is dead after a single vehicle crash early this morning on the QEW in Oakville. Now, OPP say the boy was ejected from a truck his father was driving after it rolled over. As Ali Chiasson reports, police are now investigating if fatigue played a role in the crash.
A father, his 9-year-old son, and the boy's uncle were returning home to Hamilton after a fishing trip when their truck veered off the highway around midnight and into the ditch. Police say it's looking likely that neither the boy nor his father were wearing seat belts. The boy was ejected from the truck in the rollover. His father was behind the wheel.
A 9-year-old child was transported to a hospital without vital signs, where he was later pronounced deceased. The driver of that vehicle, a 38-year-old, also from Hamilton, father of the child, was taken to hospital with serious injuries. There was also a 28-year-old adult passenger in the vehicle that was not injured.
Police say the 28-year-old, the boy's uncle, was wearing his seatbelt and it saved his life. Not only was the driver allegedly not wearing his, police also believe that he may have fallen asleep behind the wheel.
We're certainly looking into fatigue as to a potential factor in this collision. I know they had come back from some distance, I'm not sure how far away, returning back home. So that is one issue that we are looking into.
The QEW was closed for several hours overnight, and some witnesses came by to help, one attempting CPR on the boy, but his injuries were too severe.
If there's anyone else who witnessed the crash or have not spoken to police, we're asking them to call the Burlington OPP.
The driver, who was the father of the boy who died, remains in hospital and faces charges which could include dangerous driving causing death. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Oakville.
Durham police have charged a 44-year-old woman involved in a deadly crash in Ajax last November. It happened on November 7th near Roslyn Road West. Police say the woman was driving a black SUV when she struck a 13-year-old cyclist in a marked crosswalk. The teen was airlifted to hospital but later died. The driver, who remained at the scene, has been charged with careless driving causing death. Colette joins us now. And Colette, yeah, let's start in California because there was a bit of progress made over the weekend, but now we have these winds again picking up.
Right, that's exactly the problem there. So progress was made, but now holding those lines becomes more difficult. So the winds over the next few days, especially kind of peaking between tomorrow all the way to about midday Wednesday, are going to be a little bit tricky. And, you know, when those Santa Anas, and they've got some upper level atmospheric support, are driving in there, when it gets over about 50 kilometers an hour, and these at times will have gusts over 100 kilometers an hour, especially you can kind of see towards Oxnard, Fillmore, some of those, these are sustained winds, even much stronger through there. But as soon as they're over about 50 kilometers an hour, those planes, they're just not efficient. It's not safe for them to get up there, but also they're not efficient at dropping the water or that fire retardant. So we're going to watch these next few days very carefully. Back here at home, here we had this nice reprieve with some milder air. Now, if you're thinking it didn't really feel like 1 degree in Toronto, well, that was 6 a.m. this morning, and then the temperature was falling off today. And for Windsor, that one, well, that came at midnight last night, and then the temperature was falling through the day. So a lot of these highs were early in the day, and then that colder air has been falling in, and then also those stronger winds coming out of the west, driving these snow squalls. So snow squall watches, but the areas in pink into snow squall warnings, where we'll see more significant accumulations coming on through. At times, of course, some of those were making their way, flurries or light snow into the city, accumulations negligible or almost nothing for the GTA, but not the case, as you could see, off of Georgian Bay and there towards the Bruce Peninsula. That westerly flow is going to give certain areas much more significant snowfall. And that's, you know, over the next couple of days. Even with this cold air, those lakes, still a lot of open water allowing for those snow squalls. So just to give you kind of an idea there, anywhere you're seeing that blue, we're talking about over 10 centimeters, 10, 15 centimeters or so. And I mean that kind of darker blue there. So you see it all around Georgia Bay and in the lee of Lake Huron there. So that's the next few days through to about Wednesday. So yes, it is going to be breezy again tomorrow. Our overnight temperatures -9, that's for Toronto, -10 for Windsor, the nation's capital, slightly milder, but only for now. And so you take that -9, you factor these winds in, it will feel like -17 tonight. A very chilly start tomorrow morning. Tomorrow we only climb a few degrees, so that high -6. And then we get a reprieve again coming towards this coming weekend. But then next week, more cold air comes in.
Back and forth, back
here we
and
go.
forth. So it goes, right? It's
yes.
Thanks so much, Colette. And that's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for watching. Have a great night, everyone.